I always believed that silence was a sign of peace. In this house, where every clock ticked in harmony with my heartbeat, I thought I had finally found rest after a long life of sacrifices. But lately, the silence feels different. It hums like a warning I can't quite understand. The walls listen now. The air feels heavier. My name is Evelyn Harris, and for 62 years I've been a wife, a mother, and the keeper of every story this family never wanted to tell. I thought I knew my son. I thought I raised him to love, to protect, to remember where he came from. But something changed the day she entered his life. Her name is Lena. Beautiful, graceful, polite, the kind of woman who knows exactly how to smile when someone's watching. When she first stepped into my home, her perfume filled the air, sweet, expensive, and suffocating. I welcomed her. God knows I did. But her eyes never truly met mine. There was always calculation behind them. At first I told myself it was just me, an old woman afraid of losing her only son. But mothers know, we always do. We feel it before anyone says a word, the moment our child's heart begins to drift away. The dinners became quieter, the phone calls shorter. My son stopped asking for my advice, and started asking for her permission. I told my husband, something's not right. He laughed softly, said I was imagining things. Evelyn, he told me, you've always been too protective. But even he started keeping secrets, staying late, locking his phone, whispering in the dark. And then one night, I overheard them. My son and Lena, their voices floated down the hallway, muffled through the crack in their bedroom door. At first, it was nothing, just laughter. But then I heard my name. Your mother can't find out, Lena said. Her voice was cold, sharp, and my son, my own flesh and blood, replied, she won't. Not until it's done. Done? What was it? I froze in the hallway, my hand trembling against the wall. The house, the one I built, cleaned, loved, suddenly felt foreign. My chest tightened as I realized. Whatever they were hiding, it was about me. I didn't sleep that night. I sat by the kitchen window, staring at the garden I once planted with my son when he was a boy. Back then, he used to run barefoot through the mud, laughing, shouting, Mom, look, it's growing. And now, he was a stranger. The next morning, I pretended nothing happened. That's what women like me do, right? We hold the world together with polite smiles and half-empty hearts. I made breakfast. Pancakes, his favorite. He barely looked up from his phone. Lena complimented the meal, then turned to him and whispered something I couldn't hear. He smiled, at her, not at me. That was the first morning I knew my family was no longer mine. But the storm hadn't even begun, yet. Later that week, I found an envelope in the mailbox. No stamp, no return address, just my name written in unfamiliar handwriting. Inside was a single photograph. My husband and Lena, standing together, smiling. My hands went cold. For a moment I thought my heart had stopped. There was no date, no explanation. Just that smile, that betrayal, frozen in time. I stared at it for hours. My mind tried to make sense of it. Maybe it was old. Maybe it was innocent. Maybe it meant nothing. But the truth, deep down, I already knew. That silence I'd been hearing in this house wasn't peace. It was the sound of something breaking, quietly, carefully, until nothing would be left. And I, Evelyn Harris, wasn't ready to let them destroy me. Not yet. The photograph haunted me. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw it. My husband and my son's wife standing too close, smiling like they shared a secret that didn't belong to me. I kept it in my dresser drawer, hidden beneath old scarves and wedding invitations, but it burned through the wood like a wound that wouldn't close. That morning, I made myself a cup of tea. My hands trembled so much that half of it spilled onto the counter. The scent of chamomile used to calm me, not anymore. Now every sound, a door closing, a phone vibrating, made my heart jump. I watched Lena and my husband from the kitchen window that day. They stood by the car, talking, too close again. She touched his arm, a brief, familiar gesture, and he didn't pull away. When he came inside, I asked, "Where were you?" He didn't look me in the eye. "Just helping her with something," he said. Something, that word lingered like smoke in my lungs. After he left the room, I took the photograph again, holding it against the light. My eyes searched for clues. A sign, a reflection, anything. And then I saw it. In the corner of the picture, there was a date, faint, almost invisible, just a week old. It wasn't an old memory. It was now. My knees nearly gave out. I sat on the floor, clutching the photo to my chest, trying not to scream. Why would they be together like that? Why would she smile like that at him? I wanted to believe there was an explanation, a misunderstanding, a coincidence, anything that would make this nightmare make sense. But deep down, something darker whispered, "You already know why." I didn't confront them. Not yet. Instead, I started watching, listening. Every lie, every whisper, every glance, I noticed them all. That night, my husband came to bed late again. I pretended to be asleep. I heard the soft click of his phone. He was texting someone. The light from the screen reflected in his glasses. I could see the shape of her name, Lena. My breath caught in my throat. He smiled. He smiled. He smiled. At the screen. That was the moment my world tilted. The next morning, Lena greeted me with her usual sugary voice. "Good morning, Evelyn. Did you sleep well?" I looked at her face. Flawless. Innocent. She poured herself coffee like nothing was wrong. I forced a smile. I did. "Thank you." But my hands were clenched so tightly, my nails dug into my palms. She left her phone on the counter for a moment. A message notification lit up the screen. It wasn't locked. The message preview read, "Last night was perfect. Can't wait to see you again." My husband's name, Robert. My chest felt like it was collapsing. The world around me blurred. I wanted to grab that phone, throw it, scream, destroy everything, but I didn't. I swallowed it. Every tear, every scream, because I needed to be smart. If I lost control, they'd win. That night, I went into the garden, the same one where my son used to play. The moonlight touched every petal, every leaf, and I realized how long it had been since I felt truly safe here. I sat on the cold bench, the photograph in my hand, the text message burning in my memory. What had I done to deserve this? I gave them everything. I gave my life to this family, every meal, every sacrifice, every sleepless night, and they were betraying me in my own home. I stayed out there for hours, until the sky began to turn pale. When I came back inside, the house smelled like coffee and perfume. Lena was already awake, humming softly while making breakfast. She turned when she saw me, her smile bright and perfect. "Morning, Evelyn," she said. But her eyes, those cold, calculating eyes, didn't match the smile. For a moment I thought I saw a flicker of satisfaction, as if she knew I had seen the truth. She poured me a cup of coffee. "You look tired," she said gently. "I didn't sleep much," I replied. "Bad dreams?" she asked. "No," I said, forcing my voice to steady. "Just the kind that come true." Her smile faded, just for a second. But I saw it, the tension, the recognition. She knew I knew. The silence that followed was sharp enough to cut through bone. That was the morning I decided. I wasn't going to cry anymore. I was going to uncover everything. Every lie, every secret, every whisper they thought I wouldn't hear. They wanted me quiet. They wanted me weak. But I've spent my whole life being strong for everyone else. Now I would be strong for me. And before this was over, they'd regret ever thinking they could deceive me. There's something about silence that tells the truth better than words ever can. In this house, silence has a weight now. It presses against my chest. It lingers in corners. It follows me from room to room, like a ghost that refuses to leave. Since that morning, Lena's every move felt choreographed, too perfect, too precise. She spoke softer, smiled wider, offered help she never used to. Guilt perhaps, or a performance for an audience she thought she still controlled. I began to study her, not as a daughter-in-law, but as a stranger I didn't trust. Every sound became evidence, every glance a warning. I noticed things I'd never seen before. The way her perfume lingered in my husband's study long after she'd dropped something off. The faint lipstick mark on his glass, when I cleaned up after dinner. And one night, the unmistakable whisper of two voices outside my window. Too close, too intimate, too careful. I started keeping a notebook. Every detail, every time, day, hour, words. I wrote them down because I needed to see it with my own eyes, the web they were weaving around me. But the more I watched, the more I realized something unsettling. This didn't start recently. There were signs from the beginning. The way she hugged my husband at our anniversary party, too long. The way he defended her when I questioned her spending. and how, when I once told my son that Lena seemed distant, he looked away and changed the subject. Maybe he knew, maybe he chose not to see. That thought alone nearly broke me. One evening, I walked into my husband's office while he was out. The air smelled of tobacco and her perfume. I sat at his desk and opened his drawer, my hands shaking. Inside were papers, receipts, and something else, a silver locket. I opened it. Inside was a photograph. Lena, smiling. My heart froze. And behind it a folded note. I unfolded it carefully. The handwriting wasn't his, but hers. You said she'll never know, but secrets don't stay buried forever, do they? My blood ran cold. It wasn't a confession. It was a warning. What did she mean by that? Was she threatening him? Or me? That night, I couldn't sleep. I sat by the window, staring into the dark garden where my reflection looked like a stranger's. Somewhere between fear and fury, something inside me changed. If Lena thought she could manipulate him, destroy everything I built, she underestimated me, because I've lived through betrayal before. I've buried pain deeper than she could imagine. The next day I followed her. She left the house around noon, claiming she had a doctor's appointment. I watched her car disappear down the road, before taking my own, far enough behind to stay unseen. She drove to the edge of town, to a quiet cafe I didn't recognize. She parked, looked around nervously, then entered. I waited. 10 minutes passed. 15. Then I saw him, my husband, walk in through the side door. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. They sat at a corner table, speaking in low tones. I couldn't hear the words, but I could see everything I needed to. Her hand reached for his. He didn't pull away. I wanted to burst through that door and tear the illusion apart, to make them face what they'd done. But I didn't. I stayed in the car, my hands gripping the steering wheel, so hard I could feel my pulse in my palms. I took out my phone. 1 photo, 2, 3. Evidence. When I got home that night, I stared at those pictures for hours. But as I zoomed in, I noticed something strange. A man sitting at another table behind them, watching them closely. He wasn't reading. He wasn't eating, just staring. And when I enhanced the photo, I realized he wasn't a stranger. He was my son. My hands went cold. My breath caught somewhere between a sob and a scream. He knew. He had known. Maybe he'd known all along. Maybe that was why he'd been distant lately. Cold, withdrawn, unreachable. I thought he was choosing her over me. But maybe he was drowning in the same betrayal I was. For the first time in weeks, pity replaced anger. My poor boy, caught between the woman he married and the father he trusted. But that pity didn't last long. Because when I zoomed in again, I saw something else. He wasn't just watching. He was smiling. A small, twisted smile. The kind you give when you've already made peace with the damage you're about to cause. And suddenly the truth I'd been running from began to take shape. This wasn't just an affair. It was something deeper. Something planned. I didn't know it then. But that photograph, the one I took from the car, would be the beginning of everything that followed. The lies. The confessions. The night that would change everything. And as I sat there, in the dark, clutching my phone, I whispered to myself the words I didn't dare say out loud. They think I'm blind, but they've forgotten. I taught them how to see. When I looked at that picture of my son smiling, watching them, something inside me broke in a way I didn't know was possible. It wasn't the kind of pain that screams. It was the kind that whispers, crawling slowly through your veins, until you start to wonder if it's your heart breaking or your sanity slipping away. For days I carried that secret like a stone in my chest. Every time I saw my son, I searched his face for the boy I once knew. The boy who used to hold my hand at the park, who promised he'd never let me be alone. But all I saw was distance and guilt. Or maybe satisfaction. I didn't confront him, not yet. Instead, I waited, watched, listened. Sometimes silence can tell you more than 1,000 words ever could. Their conversations changed. They started avoiding each other in front of me. And that's when I realized something else. They weren't protecting themselves anymore. They were protecting something else. One night, I went into my son's old room. It used to smell like soap and sun. Now it smelled like dust and absence. But when I opened his wardrobe, I found something that didn't belong. A box. plain, black, heavy. Inside, documents, papers, with my name, property deeds, signatures, bank forms, all altered. Someone had been moving my assets, my house, my savings, my land. Slowly transferred, signed, hidden. And the signature at the bottom of every page was mine, except it wasn't. My handwriting was careful, distinct, shaped by years of letter writing. This one was a forgery, practiced, patient, terrifyingly accurate. I sank to the floor. The room spun. The betrayal wasn't emotional anymore. It was real, legal, calculated. I felt my body trembling, but I couldn't cry. I was beyond tears. The truth was clearer now. Lena wasn't just stealing my husband, she was stealing my life. But why was my son involved? Was he helping her? Did he even know? That night, I stayed awake, reading every page, tracing every mark. Then I noticed a faint stamp at the corner of one document, an address, a law firm. The next morning I went there. I dressed carefully, quietly, the way women of my age know how to disappear in plain sight. A polite smile, a soft voice. People underestimate you when they think you're fragile. The secretary greeted me, asked for my name. When I gave it, her eyes flickered, recognition, discomfort. She hesitated, then disappeared into the back office. Moments later, a man appeared, mid-40s, expensive suit, nervous hands. He looked like someone who had built a career lying for a living. "Mrs. Harris," he said, "I wasn't expecting you." "Clearly," I replied. "Since you've been handling documents with my name on them." His throat tightened, he glanced toward the door, then back at me. I believe there's been some misunderstanding." I leaned closer. "I'm old, not stupid." He sighed, defeated. "They told me you were ill," he whispered. "That you wanted everything managed quietly." "They?" I asked. He didn't answer, but his eyes gave it away before his mouth ever could. "My husband. And Lena." The rage I had kept buried began to rise. Cold, precise, deadly. I thanked him for his time, left with every copy I could take. When I returned home, Lena was there, in my kitchen, wearing my apron, stirring soup, as if she belonged there. She turned, smiled sweetly. "Evelyn, I made dinner tonight. You've done too much lately." Her voice was honey, but her eyes were knives. I set the papers down on the counter. "Did you tell him I was ill?" I asked softly. She froze. For a moment the mask slipped. "I don't know what you mean," she said. "Oh, I think you do." I stepped closer. "Because I just came from the lawyer's office. And apparently I've been signing documents I've never seen." Her expression shifted. Not fear, not guilt, amusement. A slow smile curved across her lips. "I was wondering when you'd find out," she said quietly. My heart stopped. She didn't even deny it. "Why?" I whispered. "What could you possibly want from me?" She shrugged. "Nothing personal, just everything you have." And then, before I could speak again, my son's voice echoed from behind me. "Mom," he said, "I think we need to talk." I turned slowly. He stood in the doorway, expression unreadable, eyes cold. For a second I waited for him to defend me. To say she was lying, to tell me he didn't know, but he didn't. He looked between us and said quietly, almost gently, "It's not what you think." "Then tell me," I said, my voice breaking. "Tell me what it is." He hesitated. "Then she's right." The world fell silent. Every sound, the ticking clock, the boiling soup, my heartbeat, stopped. They weren't just betraying me together. They were in this together. He walked toward her, placed his hand on her shoulder, protective, possessive. I wanted to scream, to break everything, to disappear, but I stood there, frozen, watching the two people I loved most turn into strangers before my eyes. And then Lena said it, the words that would haunt me for the rest of my life. "You taught him everything, Evelyn, even how to take what he wants." After that day, something inside me died. But something else, something colder, took its place. People talk about heartbreak, like it's a storm, sudden and violent. But for me, it was an awakening. The kind that strips away the illusion of love and leaves only truth behind. And the truth was simple. They thought they had won. My son and Lena believed I would crumble, that I'd spend my final years fading quietly into the background, letting them erase me piece by piece. But they forgot one thing, this house. Every wall, every floorboard, every inch of it carries my fingerprints. I built it. I lived every memory in it, and I know its secrets better than anyone ever will. So I decided to keep theirs. I began to play a role. The fragile mother, too tired to fight, too lost to care. I let Lena take over the house, let her redecorate, change the curtains, replace the photographs. She even moved my late husband's things out of the master bedroom without asking. Fresh start, she said, smiling. I smiled back. Yes, I whispered. A new beginning. But what she didn't notice was that I never let her near the basement. That was my space, and down there, I started building my own fresh start, one that would end exactly where hers began. At first, I just gathered evidence. Copies of documents, photos, recordings. I installed a small camera in the kitchen clock, another in the hallway. I learned every code, every password. Lena thought she was clever, keeping everything digital. But I'm older than she is, and I know that digital things can be copied, saved, or destroyed. I watched her patterns. She woke early, always called someone before my son got up. The calls were brief, coded. Once, I caught a name, Mr. Hale, the same lawyer who'd helped with the forged papers. I began recording those calls too. Meanwhile, my son grew more distant. He avoided my gaze, ate quickly, stayed out late. Once, I asked where he'd been. He looked at me, blank, and said, "Don't start, Mom. You wouldn't understand." He was right. I didn't understand how a son could betray the woman who gave him life. But I was beginning to understand what it felt like to stop loving him. One evening, I found Lena in my garden. She was cutting the roses, the ones my husband planted for me decades ago. I walked up behind her quietly. "You should be careful," I said softly. "Those thorns can draw blood." She turned, startled, a little laugh escaping her lips. "Don't worry, Evelyn," she said. "I don't bleed easily." That night, I wrote a letter to myself. "You are not weak," I wrote. "They think you've forgotten who you are, but they've forgotten who you used to be." I sealed it and placed it in my old jewelry box. A promise, a reminder. Days passed, weeks. I waited for the right moment, watching them become comfortable again, careless. And then it came. One morning, my son left his briefcase open on the dining table. Inside were documents I hadn't seen before. New ones, already signed. At the top, I read the title, Power of Attorney Transfer. It was the final step. After that, everything I owned would legally belong to him. And the date on the papers, tomorrow. They planned to take it all in one final stroke. The house, the money, everything that carried my name. So I did what any mother would do. I decided to take something back. That night, after they went to bed, I unlocked the basement door and carried a small box up to the kitchen. Inside were two things, a USB drive and an old key. The drive contained every recording, every photo, every call. The key, well, that was for later. At dawn, I made coffee. Lena came downstairs first, wearing my robe again. Another little theft. "Morning," she said cheerfully. I smiled. "You should have some coffee. I made it strong today." She took a sip, distracted by her phone. I slipped the USB into her bag. By the time my son joined her, the stage was set. They had no idea they were carrying the evidence that could destroy them. "Big day today," Lena said to him, smirking. He nodded. "Yeah, it'll all be over soon." I pretended not to hear. I just smiled, poured another cup, and said quietly, "You're right. By tonight, everything will change." When they left the house, I followed them from a distance, not to the law office this time, but somewhere unexpected. My husband's old company building. And there, parked out front, was a familiar car, Mr. Hale's. I watched as the three of them entered together, laughing. For a brief moment, I almost felt admiration. It takes courage to betray someone so completely. But courage without conscience is just cruelty. They spent nearly 2 hours inside. When they came out, they looked satisfied. Lena held a folder close to her chest. My son put his arm around her. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I simply drove home, went straight to the basement, and opened an old wooden chest that had been locked for years. Inside were my husband's journals. Every business deal, every contract, every secret he thought he'd hidden from me. And among them, a single envelope, sealed with his initials. I opened it. It was a will, an updated one, never filed, never mentioned, and the name on it wasn't my husband's. It was mine. He had left everything to me years ago, completely, legally, irrevocably, which meant whatever they'd just signed was worthless. I smiled for the first time in weeks, but it wasn't joy. It was the smile of someone who just remembered her power. They thought I was weak. They thought they'd outsmarted me. But they had played their game in my house, and I had just changed the rules. People think revenge tastes sweet, but they're wrong. It tastes like iron, cold, metallic, heavy on the tongue. It doesn't fill you with joy, it fills you with clarity. That morning, as I stood in the basement, staring at the hidden will in my hands, I realized something extraordinary. All the years I'd spent loving them, serving them, forgiving them, had given me exactly what I needed now. Patience. Patience to watch, to wait, to let them believe they were still winning. I placed the will in a sealed envelope and hid it where no one would ever look, inside the hollow of my husband's old violin case. Then I cleaned the house, humming softly. When you've been broken and rebuilt enough times, pretending becomes effortless. That afternoon they returned, flushed with triumph, still unaware of how fragile their little empire really was. Ina tossed her purse on the counter, smiling. "It's done," she said. My son exhaled, like a man who had finally crossed the finish line of a race he should never have started. "Congratulations," I said quietly, handing them tea, "to new beginnings." She raised her cup to me, eyes glinting. "You're taking this better than I expected." I smiled back. "You'd be surprised what I can handle." They didn't know that the USB I had slipped into Lena's bag was no ordinary drive. It contained everything: recordings, copies of the forged signatures, and a short, simple note that read, "Every lie leaves a shadow." I wanted her to find it, to feel that first pang of doubt, to start wondering just how much I knew. Fear, after all, is the first step to confession. That night, I watched from the top of the stairs as she sat on the couch, scrolling through her phone. Then she froze. Her face drained of color. She'd found it. Her eyes darted toward my son, sleeping beside her, unaware. She tucked the drive into her pocket and turned off the light. But I saw her hands tremble. Good. Let her tremble. Let her wonder. In the following days, I continued to play the perfect fool. I made breakfast, folded laundry, smiled when they spoke to me. But inside, every gesture was a move on the board. Every smile, a calculated distraction. Lena started to unravel first. She became paranoid. Once I found her in the kitchen, late at night, whispering on the phone. When I entered, she jumped. "Oh, Evelyn," she stammered. "Couldn't sleep either." I walked to the counter, poured myself water. "No," I said softly. "Sometimes the ghosts in this house keep me awake." She didn't answer. The next morning, I noticed her phone left unlocked on the table. Messages with Mr. Hale. Urgent. Nervous. "We need to talk. Someone knows." I forwarded everything to my own email before she came back. Later that evening, I called my son into the living room. "Tell me," I said gently. "Are you happy?" He looked confused. "Of course, Mom. Why wouldn't I be?" "Because you don't look it," I replied. I leaned forward, lowering my voice. "Do you know what she's hiding from you?" His brow furrowed. "What are you talking about?" "Your wife," I said, "isn't just taking what's mine. She's taking what's yours." He scoffed, frustrated. "Stop it, Mom. This obsession." But I cut him off. "I'm not obsessed. I'm awake." I left him there, angry and uncertain. A seed planted. Doubt, like poison, works slowly. Over the next week, I made sure that seed grew. A few misplaced documents in his briefcase. A few receipts I knew he'd find. Expensive ones, under her name. A new necklace in her drawer, with initials that weren't his. By the third night, they started fighting. Soft at first, then louder, until even the walls seemed to shiver. I stayed in my room, listening. Her voice, sharp, defensive. His broken, trembling. And beneath it all, I heard something I hadn't heard in weeks. Fear. That's when I knew I had them both exactly where I wanted them. The next morning, I found Lena crying in the garden. Mascara streaked her face. The roses she had once cut so proudly lay trampled in the dirt. I approached her slowly. "You should be careful," I said again. "Roses remember who hurts them." She looked up at me, eyes red. "You did this," she hissed. "You're trying to turn him against me." I smiled gently. "Oh dear, I don't have to." That afternoon, my son packed a bag and left the house without a word. Lena didn't follow. She just sat at the table, shaking, staring at the cup of tea I placed before her. "Would you like some sugar?" I asked. Her voice broke. "What do you want from me?" I leaned closer, whispering, I want you to understand what it feels like to lose everything you thought you controlled. She swallowed hard. You don't scare me. Oh, I know, I said, standing up, but the truth will. That night, I sent the recordings, every last file, to the law firm, to my son, and to the police. The forged signatures, the fake documents, the transfers, all of it. Within 24 hours, chaos erupted. Mr. Hale disappeared. My son came back, furious, confused, desperate. And Lena, she vanished, too, leaving behind only her wedding ring and that silver locket I'd once found in my husband's drawer. Inside it now was a note. You win, Evelyn, but you'll never know what you've truly lost. I stared at those words, until they blurred. For the first time, I didn't feel victorious. Because revenge doesn't bring back what was stolen, it just replaces pain with silence. Still, silence at least, is honest. I went down to the basement, locked the door behind me, and opened the violin case. The will was still there, untouched. I smiled faintly, and whispered, It's over. But as I turned off the light, I noticed something on the wall, a faint outline in dust, where something had once hung. A small rectangular shape, a missing photograph, and I realized Lena's final words weren't a lie. There was still something I hadn't uncovered, something they'd hidden even from me. And whatever it wasn't over yet. The house had secrets. I had always known that though, never fully understood how deeply they ran. Every corner, every floorboard, every dusty shelf whispered the stories of years past. And now, in the silence left by their departure, the house was speaking to me again, revealing what they had tried to hide. It began in the study. The room smelled faintly of cedar and old paper. I walked slowly, running my hand along the shelves, until my fingers brushed against the edge of a drawer I'd never noticed. Small, unassuming, hidden behind rows of books, curiosity drew me to it. I opened the drawer. Inside there were letters. Old letters, handwritten, folded neatly, yellowed at the edges. I recognized my husband's handwriting immediately. But as I read, my heart skipped. The letters weren't addressed to me. They weren't addressed to any known friend or family member. They were to Lena. My husband had known her, long before our family, before our son was even born, before she entered our lives. Each letter was filled with admiration, instructions, guidance. It seemed she had been groomed, prepared for something that now, in retrospect, I understood far too clearly. I sank to the floor, holding the letters to my chest. Memories flooded me. The first time Lena smiled at me, the first dinner she shared with our family, the subtle ways she ingratiated herself with my husband and my son. It had all been planned, all of it. And suddenly, the extent of the betrayal hit me fully. It wasn't just emotional. It wasn't just financial. It was generational. She had been trained to take everything. My love, my trust, my family. And now she had executed that plan flawlessly. I stood, trembling, and went to the basement. I needed to see everything clearly. Lay it out, connect the threads. There, among the journals and documents I had been safeguarding, I found another box, smaller, labeled with my husband's initials. I opened it. Inside were photographs, old photographs of Lena, even as a child, standing next to my husband at events I had never known existed. School recitals, family gatherings, social events, all places I had assumed were unrelated. And there, in the corner of one photograph, barely visible, was a note. The plan is in motion. Do not fail. I held the photo up to the light, my hands shaking. The truth was undeniable. This had not been a chance encounter. Lena had been part of my life, long before she ever became my daughter-in-law. My husband had orchestrated it all, and my son had either known or been manipulated to participate. I felt my chest tighten, but I forced myself to breathe, to think, to plan. I realized then that revenge, though sweet in its own way, wasn't enough. There were layers beneath layers, a conspiracy of affection and deceit, stretching back years, that had targeted me deliberately. I spent hours that night in the basement, sorting, cataloging, and photographing everything. Each piece of evidence was another layer of understanding, another step toward reclaiming what had been stolen. By dawn, I had a plan. It wasn't just about exposing them anymore. It was about making them understand the magnitude of what they had done. When they returned, my son first, Alone, I confronted him quietly. You knew, I said. He looked away. Yes, he admitted. But I didn't think it would go this far. I shook my head. Far, do you even know what far is? Do you know what it takes to manipulate a life completely? To destroy everything a person holds dear? He swallowed, unable to answer. I left him there and went to Lena's old room. The door creaked as I opened it. Dust had settled on the furniture, but among the remnants, I found something she had left behind. Her old journal. Inside were her confessions, her plans, her fears, every strategy laid bare, every emotion calculated, every betrayal recorded. And yet, beneath it all, I found something unexpected. Vulnerability. A fleeting moment, where she had written about fear. Fear of being caught. Fear of being exposed. Fear of losing the only life she had schemed to achieve. It was a chink in her armor, the first sign that her perfect game might be flawed. I realized then that the final act was approaching. I had all the pieces. I knew the players, and I had discovered the secrets they believed were buried forever. For the first time in weeks, I felt a flicker of calm. Not relief, not victory, but readiness. The house had shown me what they had left behind, and now, I would decide what to do with it. I stepped out of her room, into the long hallway, and whispered to the empty walls. You thought you could hide everything from me, but the walls remember, the shadows remember, and I will not forget. The morning was quiet, almost deceptively so. The kind of quiet that warns you something is about to shatter. I had everything prepared, all the evidence, all the photographs, letters, recordings, and journals, meticulously sorted and ready to reveal. The house, once a place of comfort, had become my stage, and the audience would feel the weight of every secret they had buried. I waited for them in the living room. The sunlight filtering through the curtains caught dust in golden shafts, painting the room with a sense of solemnity, perfect for the reckoning to come. Lena arrived first. She stepped into the room with a smile that was practiced, confident, ignorant of the trap I had laid. You're looking well, she said lightly, attempting to charm me as she always had. I stood holding a stack of documents in my hands. You've been very busy, I said softly. She tilted her head, a flicker of curiosity crossing her face. Busy? Yes, I replied, laying the documents on the coffee table. All of this you've worked so hard to hide, but hiding isn't enough anymore. Her smile faltered. I could see it, the subtle tightening of her jaw, the way her eyes darted toward the papers. I continued calmly, deliberately, letting each word sink in. I know everything, I said. Every forged signature, every hidden account, every lie you've ever told in this house. She laughed nervously. You're exaggerating. I shook my head, picking up a photograph from the top of the stack. It was Lena as a child, standing next to my husband, a letter visible in her hand. I have proof, I said. Proof that this was never an accident, that everything you've done, every smile, every manipulation, was planned decades ago. Her face drained of color. You don't understand, she stammered. Your husband, he wanted to protect me. I laughed softly, a sound devoid of humor. Protect you? He groomed you, trained you, used you to destroy my family, my son, my life. She opened her mouth, then closed it again, words failing her. I continued, lifting another document, a contract she had signed in my name. Look familiar? I asked. Her eyes widened. She swallowed, shaking her head. You can't prove. I let the recordings play. Her voice, my son's voice, confessions, agreements, strategies. Every deceit recorded, every betrayal undeniable. When it finished, silence fell like a curtain. Lena sank into the couch, pale, trembling. Why are you doing this? She whispered. Why expose everything? Because truth has weight, I replied softly. And lies, no matter how long they are hidden, eventually fall. Then my son entered. I watched him freeze when he saw the documents, the photographs, the recordings displayed across the table. His face went pale. You're bluffing, he said. I shook my head. You know I'm not. I've known what you were doing for months, planning for weeks, and preparing for today my entire life. His voice grew sharp. I didn't know it would get this far. I looked him in the eyes. You did. You always knew. The question is, did you ever care? He faltered, unable to respond. And in that moment, I realized, my son wasn't innocent. He wasn't just a victim. He was complicit, carrying out the plans, even if naively. I leaned closer to him. placing a hand gently on his shoulder. I wanted to believe in you. I wanted to see the boy who once held my hand, but he is gone. And now, we face the consequences together. Lena's trembling intensified. You can't take everything from us, she shouted. I smiled faintly. Oh, I don't need to take everything. You've already lost what matters most, my trust. And that, you will never get back. I played the recordings again, letting the guilt settle like heavy stones in their chests. Their eyes met, realizing for the first time how deep their betrayal had cut. Then I handed them each an envelope. Inside were copies of the evidence, sent to every authority, every lawyer, and every person involved. You wanted control, I said softly. Now everyone will see the truth, and you will live with it. Because lies have consequences, and secrets are never safe. My son fell to his knees, desperate. I didn't know. I shook my head. You did. And now, you will carry the weight of that knowledge for the rest of your life. Lena screamed, lunging toward the papers, but I held her back with a quiet strength that surprised even me. This ends now, I said, voice steady, unyielding. And it ends with the truth, not with your lies. Hours passed. They left eventually, defeated, broken, and terrified of the exposure that awaited them. I sat alone in the living room, the sunlight fading into evening. I felt the calm of victory, but also a hollow ache, the realization that what was broken could never be fully repaired. I had won, but the cost was clear. Love lost, trust shattered, family changed forever. And yet, in that quiet, I whispered to myself. The house was quiet again, but this time the silence wasn't peaceful nor threatening. It was hollow. The kind of silence that lingers after a storm, when everything has been broken, and all that's left is the echo of what used to be. For years I had begged for peace, and now that I had it, I wasn't sure I wanted it anymore. The truth was out. My son had moved away. Lena had disappeared completely. The authorities had what they needed. The documents, the recordings, the bank accounts, every piece of deception that had poisoned this family. And yet, even as justice loomed over them, it didn't feel like victory. The walls still remembered. The air still carried the ghost of their laughter. The smell of her perfume, faint but unmistakable, lingered in the corners like a cruel reminder. Sometimes I still caught myself setting an extra plate at the table, or turning my head, expecting to see my son walking in with that familiar half-smile he used to wear as a boy, but he never did. I had uncovered everything, or at least I thought I had, until one morning, a week after the confrontation, I received a letter. No return address, just my name written in trembling handwriting that felt familiar in a way I couldn't quite place. I opened it slowly. Inside was a single page, folded twice. The paper smelled faintly of lavender and old perfume, and the words, written in uneven lines, made my breath catch. You weren't supposed to find out this way. I tried to stop him. You were never the enemy. Please forgive me. There was no signature. But I didn't need one. I knew that handwriting. It was Lena's. I sat down, staring at the words until they blurred before my eyes. Stop him? Who? My husband was gone. My son exposed. Was there someone else? I looked closer at the bottom corner of the page. There was a faint watermark. Set. Helena's Women's Shelter. That name stirred something in my memory. A few months before Lena and my son's wedding, my husband had made a donation. Large, generous, but secretive. He had told me it was for charity, but now, reading that letter, I realized it was more than that. It was a place, a connection, a clue. I spent the next day searching through old papers, emails, donation receipts. Every trail led back to the same address, a small shelter on the outskirts of the city, one my husband had supported for years. And there, buried in one of his old ledgers, I found something chilling, a birth record, dated 30 years ago. The mother's name was Lydia Moore, my husband's former assistant. The father's name had been left blank, but the child's name, Helena Lydia Moore. Lena. My hands began to shake. I whispered the words aloud, as if saying them might make them less real. He hadn't just known her. He hadn't just manipulated her. He had created her. She was his daughter. And my son had married her. A wave of nausea and disbelief crashed over me. It was impossible. And yet the evidence was there, clear as daylight. The donations, the secrecy, the guidance. It all made sense now. My husband had orchestrated everything. He had built a web so twisted, so immoral, that even in death his control lingered. He had kept the truth hidden from everyone, including Lena herself. She hadn't known. And when she finally discovered it, she had tried to stop him. I sat in silence for a long time, the letter trembling in my hands. Tears came slowly, silently, not for them, not for him, but for the years I had lost believing I was the fool in the story. All along, I had been fighting against a woman who was just as trapped as I was, and my husband, the man I trusted most, had betrayed not just me but his own blood. That night, I lit a candle in the living room. I placed the letter beside it, and for the first time in months, I prayed, not for vengeance, not for forgiveness, but for peace, true peace. For the first time since this nightmare began, the flame flickered softly, casting shadows across the room. I thought about Lena somewhere, out there, running from the truth, from herself, from the sins of a man who had controlled us both. And I whispered into the empty air, "You're free now, child. Run. Don't ever let him win again." The candle burned low. Outside, the wind rose, rattling the windows gently, a whisper of the past, fading at last. But deep down, I knew one thing for certain. The story wasn't over. There was still one last thing left to do, one final secret, buried beneath all the lies. And when I found it, I would finally understand everything. They say that when everything is destroyed, what's left behind is freedom. But I've learned that freedom doesn't come from truth. It comes from choosing what to do with it. A week after the letter arrived, I couldn't stop thinking about the shelter. St. Helena's Women's Shelter. It lingered in my mind like a riddle waiting to be solved. So I went there. The drive took 3 hours through winding roads in empty countryside. The shelter was small, quiet, hidden behind overgrown trees and iron gates that creaked as I pushed them open. The air smelled of rain and rust. A woman greeted me inside. Her eyes were kind but cautious. "Can I help you?" she asked. I told her my name. For a long moment, she said nothing. Then she nodded slowly. "You're Evelyn," she said softly. "He said you might come one day." My stomach turned. "He?" She hesitated, then handed me a worn box tied with string. "Your husband left this here. Years ago. He said it was for you. But only when the time was right." I wanted to refuse it. Every part of me screamed not to open that box. But I took it anyway. Inside were photographs, letters, and a small cassette tape labeled in his handwriting, "For Evelyn, the truth." I sat on a chair in the dim light of the shelter office, holding the tape like it was something alive. I found an old recorder on the desk, pressed play, and waited. The tape crackled. Then his voice filled the room, deep, steady, the voice I had once loved. "Evelyn, if you're hearing this, then I'm gone. And you've already discovered enough to hate me. But before you judge me, listen." I closed my eyes. The sound of him made my chest tighten painfully. Lena wasn't just my mistake. She was my responsibility. Her mother, Lydia, she came to me for help. I promised her protection, but I failed. When Lydia died, I couldn't let the child be taken by the system. So I kept her close, too close. I thought I could fix what was broken, but I created something worse. A web of lies that trapped us all. His breath trembled slightly before he continued. "I tried to keep you safe, Evelyn. But by the time I realized what I'd done, it was too late. Lena never knew the truth. I kept it from her, thinking ignorance would save her. But it only doomed her, and our son." My hands were shaking. Every word felt like a knife cutting through the last remnants of illusion. "I know you hate me now. Maybe you should. But everything I did, every lie, every secret, was for you. I wanted to protect our family. I just didn't know that in doing so I would destroy it." There was a long pause. Then, almost as if he were speaking directly to me, "If you still can, Evelyn, forgive her. She's as much a victim as you are. And if she ever comes back, tell her the truth." I couldn't. The tape ended with a click. I sat there in silence, the weight of everything pressing down on me. The man I had loved had built his life on deceit, not out of cruelty, but out of fear. And now all that remained were ghosts. When I stepped outside, the sky was heavy with clouds. I drove back home slowly, every mile feeling heavier than the last. That night, I placed the tape in a drawer beside my bed. I didn't destroy it. I couldn't, because deep down, I knew she'd come back. Lena, not for forgiveness, not for redemption, but for the truth. And she did. 3 days later, I heard a car in the driveway. When I opened the door, she was standing there, pale, exhausted, eyes swollen from tears. For a moment neither of us spoke. Then she whispered, "Did you know?" I nodded slowly. "Yes," her voice cracked. "I didn't mean to hurt him. Or you. I didn't know who I was." I stepped closer, my heart trembling, but my resolve steady. "I know," I said softly. "None of us did." I handed her the tape. She looked at it like it was poison. "What's this?" "The truth," I said. "Your father's voice. Everything he couldn't tell you." She hesitated, her fingers brushing mine for just a second. A brief, fragile connection between two broken souls, bound by the same man's lies. Then she took it, nodded once, and turned to leave. As her car disappeared down the road, I stood in the doorway, the wind brushing against my face, like the touch of the past saying goodbye. And for the first time in a long while, I didn't feel hatred. I didn't feel rage. Only quiet. The silence returned. Not hollow, not threatening, but whole. It was the kind of silence that comes after truth, when there's nothing left to hide, nothing left to lose. I walked back inside, sat by the window, and whispered to the night, "You win, truth. You always do." The candle beside me flickered once, then went out, and in that final moment, I realized some stories don't end with forgiveness or revenge. They end with understanding, and sometimes that's enough.